Welcome to It's Your Turn. I'm Brenda Florida, certified life coach, and no matter how exhausted, stressed, anxious, or overwhelmed you are, there is hope. You can start exactly where you are. There's nothing wrong with you. In fact, you're ready for it to be your turn, or you wouldn't be here. You know, we hear words like vitality and confidence and empowerment and transformation, but what do they really mean? What do they look like in the practical aspects of our life? In the It's Your Turn podcast, we explore, learn, and put into practice practical tools and wise concepts for transformation. This is real life change, not platitudes. It's the intersection of the practical and the aspirational. It's your turn to make decisions that are aligned with exactly what you want. And if you've lost connection to what you want, that's okay. We'll reconnect it. You'll learn how to shift out of self-sabotaging patterns and tap in to the clarity, confidence, and vitality that you may feel like has been lost forever. It's your turn to step into the driver's seat of your life and embrace the power that is within you. So let's get to it. Today, we're talking about your personal truth. What do I mean by that? And no, it is not a trick question. So when I'm talking about personal truth, I mean your unique truth that is going to have nuances to it that may or may not fit into a collective belief system or thought process that other people have. You know, it is your unique expression is what comes out of it. It is the ability to be authentic. Like, we can't have our unique expression in the world. Like, you know, what do I want to do when I grow up? Whether it's how you express yourself professionally or creatively or as a parent or as a lover, as a person, in every single way you express yourself is impacted by the things you think are your truth. And what we know when we really start to look inward at our lives is that we are conditioned to believe many, many things that are not truth. And we believe many things that are not the truth. Okay. And so, this, everybody can think of their own example as I'm saying this, but just things that you used to believe, maybe religiously, or it could be a stereotype of a type of people that you used to believe were this way, and now you realize that's not true. It could be any sort of, like, even silly things like superstition that you think, every time you wear that sweatshirt, your team wins, and then, wow, one time you don't wear the sweatshirt and they won anyway. So there's plenty of things from the sort of silly, like that example, to things that are far more important and impactful that we have absorbed as a truth that is not necessarily true for us as an individual. I came from a super religious, very conservative family. And so I grew up believing many things were true that I no longer believe are true. And I was in my 30s before I started dropping some of those beliefs. And it's been even in this last year that I've kind of gone to a new level of dropping some of the things I used to believe were true and embracing other beliefs. And so if we do not do the work that is the inner work of discovering where have I been conditioned and may not even realize it, and once I realize I have been conditioned, what do I want to really embrace as my truth? Now, there can be a period of exploration, of curiosity. There are many beliefs, like going back to my comment about my religious beliefs, many things that I don't believe what I was taught was true, but some of them I don't really have a replacement belief for, and that's okay. Like sometimes there's a gap between I know that what I was taught or conditioned to is not true, but I'm not really sure what for me my truth is. Like this happens a lot in something even like people pleasing, right? People pleasing is a learned response. It's a learned coping mechanism to feel loved, to feel valued, to feel like we're important, to feel like we are meaningful, that we belong. There are a lot of reasons we get into people pleasing, which, this is a little bit oversimplified, but just to describe it, is when we will do things for other people, even at the expense of ourselves, or keep ourselves silent in a group situation. It could be a group of one other person, but in some sort of conversation, communication, where we don't agree, but if we feel like if we speak up, it's going to upset somebody or rock the boat in some way. And so we just keep our mouth shut. It comes with a lot of phrases like, oh, it just wasn't worth it. Oh, or we dismiss things people do to us that hurt our feelings or upset us. Oh, they didn't mean it. Oh, it wasn't that big of a deal. Those kinds of excuses for other people's behavior that keep us silenced. And the whole doing too much, over functioning, which allows other people to underfunction if they want to. And not getting enough rest and not prioritizing our self-care and all those kinds of things that you can lump into people pleasing. That is something we are taught to do. There are different ways the genders are taught to do that culturally. This is what women do. They're the caretakers of the home. They're the nurturers. They're supposed to be giving and taking care of and community and all kinds of things. And sometimes that's wrapped in religion, but sometimes not. It can be wrapped in, all kinds of, spirituality, new age thought, all those kinds of things. It's also total patriarchy, right? That women are meant to serve men, but men often are people pleasers too for kind of different reasons. But it turns out to be the same, where they have to stay in the job they hate because they have to support their family. That's their job. So all these things are like cultural beliefs that we pick up, whether you use that word in your own mind or, if you're talking about this, you may not use the word belief, but when we do something over and over and over, it's because we have the belief that we need to, because we've told ourselves, or we've been told over and over, this is what girls do, this is what boys do, this is what girls don't do, this is what boys don't do. There's still so many statistics that are so unfortunate, and they are improving, but there's still so many statistics around what little girls, wish for, dream about in their lives, like after they're in about kindergarten or so. I saw this just the other day, but I can't remember what the age was. It could have been second grade, but these were still very young girls who had believed up until that point, they could basically be anything they wanted to be. And by the time, so I'm inserting myself on the statistics, because in their family, they've got parents maybe, or grandparents or whatever, that have taught them, you can do anything you want. You can be anything you want to be. But then they get into school and the system of education and being around other kids who do not have parents that think that way. And, those impressions that we pick up often without even realizing it when we're children, because we don't have the analytical mind to kind of separate out those kinds of messages. So we just sort of absorb everything like a sponge. And so by like second grade or whatever this was in these statistics, they already were not, the girls were not believing, they could be president, or they could be, anything they wanted to be, or that they were good at math and sciences, various things like that, where we're still seeing them way over out of balance in the sort of male female gender bias. And of course we don't even have to open the can of worms. I don't know, that's not the best way to say it, but for people who don't identify with a gender, like there's so much bias in every way towards them. So if you are a they or don't identify, in a gender like male and female, you already know. You don't need me to tell you, as a cis white, woman, that you have had so many biases, and I mean, just prejudice and hate and so many things already put upon you that are not true. There can be a collective belief or a group of people who says that's true. I was raised to believe, homosexuality was a sin. I mean, nobody was even talking in the religious circle I was in, about non-binary and, gender stuff, because everybody was male or female. You were whatever you were at birth, and you only had heterosexual, sexual relationships. So I was raised to believe that all of that was the truth. That was like God's design, right? Was only cisgender heterosexual men and women. My goodness. What a super narrow way of thinking, that if there is a God, it wouldn't be so narrow-minded. So we're raised with all this stuff. We're cultured with all this stuff. And some of the things we might from a very early age reject, or by the time we're teenagers reject. Okay. And that's wonderful. And then for some of us, it takes longer. But what I want to challenge you for today is to be able to start to look at some things in your life, and just with sort of curiosity and without judgment. We're not trying to use these things to judge ourselves. We're looking for what is my real truth about this issue. So I may not come to it immediately. Like I remember when I had my first friend, like I was already friends with them. I thought they were straight because that's the way they lived publicly in the world. But then found out they were actually bisexual, and, went and had affairs with same gender people. I think in a way that their spouse even knew. But anyway, we don't have to get into whether or not they were doing it secretly or not. But anyway, it was just my first encounter of like, oh, wait a minute. Here's a person that if I didn't already know them, I would have judged them as, that's wrong. It's a sin. It's bad. It's, all the things. But I really liked this person. And so it made me think, wait a minute, what if all that stuff I was taught, that was how God thinks of things, right? Religion is such a powerful influencer because of that. It's got like all that weight of God on it. What if that's not actually true? And it took me a while to work through that and get to the point where I didn't have any judgment towards this person as an individual or that kind of lifestyle or, any of that. But that was a little journey for me. I didn't just turn the switch because I started questioning it. So give yourself some space, but start to think, and it may not be as dramatic as that, right? But think about some things. For instance, I had a client just the other day that we were talking about this, and in the realm of their profession and what they did for a living and what they were good at, right? Versus, so that's why they stayed in their job, because they were really good at it. Do you love it? No, not really, but I'm good at it. Well, so does that mean you need to stay there? And then once you start questioning that, the sort of, is this really true? And do I have to do it this way? Then you can start to open that door to, wait a minute, maybe I've been conditioned to believe this is true, when my own personal truth, if I were to work to uncover it, might not feel that way at all. And that's where your life really opens up. The beauty of it is sometimes it can be a little unsettling in the process, because you're kind of going into unknown territory sometimes. But it's so empowering, because we don't actually ever have true personal power unless we're in our truth. Otherwise, we can't hold on to it. And so personal power always comes with personal truth. And that's why I love sort of identifying myself as a personal truth coach, because when I look at all the people I coach, and, when people ask me, well, what do you do as a life coach, or what kind of people do you work with? I've worked with men and women that are straight, that are not, that are, having all kinds of different sexual expressions, with teenagers and, people in their 80s, and over all kinds of issues, from career to relationships to their partnerships or marriages, or people they're significantly dating and or starting to date, and don't want to repeat the same habits, or don't want to pass down some family patterns of dysfunction to their kids, and so they know they need to figure it out for themselves, or how to recover from a relationship that has ended, and how to change careers, and how to grow a business. And just like, I mean, I'm not sure there probably is a topic I haven't covered with somebody, but not many of them, because we have, talked about all things from parenting to what, this concept of like what's normal sexually or something, which there's no such thing of. And so when I think about what it is that I really do and what my gifts are, and what I hope you get out of these podcasts, is that I'm just helping to guide you into your truth. I'm not telling you what your truth needs to be. I never coach a client into, you need to leave, you need to change the job, you need to leave the partnership or marriage or whatever. Even when I've had clients who are clearly in emotionally abusive relationships, I can't tell them to leave, because having been in some myself, like, you're never ready to leave until you're ready to leave. Like, nobody else can get you there. That is an inner journey. And so all I want to do is get each client, and in my own small ways with all of you who are listening, move you closer to your own truth. Because when you get to your own truth, you make the move, or leave the spouse, or change the job, or pivot in your business, or set the boundary with your parent, or skip going home for Christmas, or whatever it is, right? Because once you know your truth, then setting those boundaries and behaving in ways that are congruent with your truth gets a hell of a lot easier. But when we don't really know, like, maybe we just kind of get stuck in the questioning, because we're not being this is conscious about it, as conscious as the way I'm talking through it with you. Like, I know I don't believe this anymore, but I haven't really gone to the work and the energy of figuring out how to articulate what I actually do believe. And so I can be sort of swayed by anybody's good argument. And so I don't really feel comfortable to speak up, because I don't really know what I think about something. And so once we really know what our own truth is, it empowers us in all kinds of ways you can't even imagine. That's why I have often said, like, the transformations my clients get are just astounding. And I'm just so in awe and celebration of each one of them, and all the things they've done and changed and accomplished in their lives. But it wasn't because I gave them the advice to go there. It's because I helped them find their own truth in their own time, in their own way. And some of them who have worked with me for a long time, or who have worked with me and left and came back, their truth changes, right? Because truth is not a rock, it's a river. And so, what you believe is true about something for you can become different as you grow and change in your own life. Even your ideas of your sexual expression, sexual orientation. I've said before, I have been so biased and conditioned towards being heterosexual. I have had times where I think, well, could I be gay and not even like know it, so to speak? I don't know that that's possible, but I do know that I was so cultured against that it would take an effort for me to be open to it. Now, I don't happen to be sexually attracted to a lot of women, so it's not something I've spent a lot of energy to explore. If I was really attracted to a lot of women, I would start to really unpack that and say, now, wait a minute, here's some evidence that I may not be as straight as I think I am, right? I had somebody on years ago. In fact, even her name is escaping me now, so sorry, that's not very helpful. But she coached women who were married to men and were leaving those relationships because they had some understanding at the beginning of that journey, or they were fully there in believing they were a lesbian. And I loved our conversation because there are just so many ways we can be so deeply entrenched in an idea that we haven't even let ourselves explore that maybe that's not the truth of who we really are. And I promise you, in much more or less big, that's not very grammatically correct, but in smaller ways, let's say it that way. I coach people all the time in things that they'll say, oh no, that's my, authentic nature. That's who I really am. That's my truth. And I know intuitively that that's just what they've been conditioned to believe. I'm a procrastinator. I'm unorganized. I just start projects and never finish them. Well, that may be a pattern in your history, but that does not mean that is the truth of who you are. It could be that you used something like that as a coping mechanism, or like lots of times clients will say, oh, they just hate conflict. And so they avoid conflict. And so that's why they don't speak up and whatever. It's not that they hate conflict. It's that they don't allow themselves to own their own truth, or they don't even know what their own truth is. When we know our truth, it's not hard to speak up. And so usually we don't even internalize it or tell ourselves a story that I'm in conflict. If I say this, I'm going to be in conflict with you. It's just like, you can't see me, but I'm wearing a red sweatshirt. And if somebody came in and said, I love your blue sweatshirt, I would just be like, no, it's red. And I wouldn't be like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be in conflict with that person, right? Because it's just a simple truth to me. And that's the way life gets when we know our truth. Setting the boundary gets easy because it's like, well, of course, I'm not going to let somebody do that to me. Would you let somebody walk up and slap you in the face and do nothing? Probably not, because that's so egregious. You would right away respond without any thought that, oh, am I going to upset them? Or maybe in this situation, it was okay that they slapped me in the face, or I can just get over it. They didn't mean to. No, right? Like that crosses a line where you're in your truth. You're not going to let somebody slap you in the face. But if they say something unkind, that may not be as clear for you in your truth. But when it is, you don't. You just find a way to say something. I don't like it when you talk to me that way, or to me, that was a really unkind thing to say. What did you, or you ask questions like, what did you really mean by that? Or do you want to reword that? Because that sounded really critical to me, or really mean to me, or what you're calling teasing and humor is not funny to me. So I need you to express yourself in a different way, or, whatever. There's a million different ways to do it. But it doesn't seem so quote unquote confrontational because you're in your truth. And when you're in your truth, you're just not going to let somebody treat you in ways that don't align with your truth. Or you're going to get out of relationship with them, right? Maybe it's just a stranger and you're just going to walk away from them because it's not even worth expending the energy to have the conversation or something. So I'm not saying, we don't always speak up, but we certainly do not always talk ourselves out of speaking up. And when you're in your own truth, knowing the difference between those and what to do becomes much, 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 much easier, even on big topics, because you're so clear on your truth. But most of us have been conditioned to believe all kinds of things as quote unquote truth that are actually not our personal truths. And so that's why sticking up for them or speaking up for them gets a little tough to do, because we don't have that inner clarity. So I'm really interested if this resonates. What I'd really love for you to do is just allow yourself the sort of curiosity to explore, like, and you don't have to dive right into the deep end of the pool. It could be how you dress. Oh my gosh. So many people dress or cut their hair, wear their hairstyle in a way that is what they think they're supposed to do. You think you're supposed to because of your body type, or the face, your shape of your face, or your coloring, or like what, or your age. Where it's like, oh, well, if you're over 40, you can't wear a mini skirt. No, not true, but so you might believe that and have no mini skirts in your closet. And so maybe that's a thing that, to kind of start on an easier topic, take something that's more like that, or that, you're good moms do this all the time, or good moms, good dads do that, good husbands, good wives do that, whatever it is. Those messages of what makes somebody good are often things that are just cultural or religious or family conditioning. And some of them we might agree with, some of them might be our personal truth, but many of them will not, or there'll be some nuance that makes it, well, it's kind of that, but not 100%. Because for me, this other thing, if this other component is present, then I feel differently about it. And the exercise of allowing yourself to open up to that is what growth is all about. That is the definition of a growth mindset. And I know you have one, or you wouldn't be here with me today. So thank you so much for being on this episode of It's Your Turn, because it's absolutely your turn to take the time and give yourself the space and the energy and the bandwidth to really consider what is your truth and what is not. Where have you been conditioned? And maybe you don't even know what your truth is, or maybe you kind of suspect, but it seems so off the wall, you don't want to believe it or whatever. That's a lot of times why people get into one-on-one coaching, because they want to explore that. And it's so much easier to do with an impartial guide like myself, because I don't, in the end, care what you believe, what your truth is or what it's not, only that you find it, right? So I don't ever come to a session with an agenda any more than I come to this podcast episode with an agenda to get you to realize this or that is something you're doing wrong, or something, whatever. That's not it. I just want you to get to whatever your truth is and live authentically from there. So with that, I will leave you until next week, but I would love to hear, comments wherever you're getting this podcast. You can go to the show notes, you can email me, you can DM me on Instagram, and let me know something. Maybe it's something you're struggling with because you're thinking maybe it's not your truth, but you're kind of afraid to admit it. Or maybe it's an aha of like, oh my gosh, I thought because I'm 45, I couldn't wear a mini skirt, but now I am and I love it, whatever it is. I always love hearing from you. So in truth, I leave you today. Thank you for joining me for this episode of It's Your Turn. I've got resources and links in the show notes for you. But here's what's more fun. DM me on Instagram at Brenda Florida Coach and let me know you listened to today's episode. I'd love to connect with you. And then share this episode with somebody who needs to hear it, because I know you know somebody who needs to hear it. And I'll see you in the next episode of It's Your Turn.